Welcome to the future, a brave new world where BioNutri do webinars. Some of you watching this may have attended one of the seminars given by myself or Sue McGarrigle over the last few years. But here, in this multimedia world, we aim to reach a few more practitioners, perhaps in some of the corners of the UK we never get to. For those of you who don't know us, my name is Edward Joy, and alongside my colleague, Sue McGarrigle, we form the technical support team for BioNutri. It's a small team, so we hope you'll find it easy to contact us should you have any questions. In this video, we would like to introduce our two latest formulations, Immunodophilus and Phytoepicel, and explain the role that they will play in BioNutri's range, but more importantly, the role we hope they will play in your client's nutrition. The video will be divided into two halves. First, you'll hear a 20-minute breakdown from Sue, and then you'll hear from me about where we think these products could fit into your practice. You'll have the chance to re-watch this video using the link in the practitioner section of our website. To access this restricted area, enter the password nutrition2009. The contact information for both myself and Sue McGarrigle can be found in this practitioner area. If you have any questions afterwards, Sue and I will be all too happy to help you. It only remains for me to say that the information in this video is provided for professional use only and is available to only practitioners registered with BioNutri. Now please, sit back, relax and enjoy this video. BioNutri, Cell Health.
Maintaining the integrity and healthy function of epithelial cells is a primary factor in staying healthy. This is because they mainly function as an interface or lining of the body's surfaces, forming an integral part of immune protection, the reproductive system, the lungs, the GI tract, and the ductal system, such as the liver, salivary tissue, and secretory glands like the pancreas. The secretory glands lining the stomach, the thyroid, the thymus, the pituitary, and the lymphatic system. They also fulfill many specific roles in the body, such as acting as a barrier or to facilitate absorption as well as secretion, and as such form a specialized component of many organ systems throughout the body. The intestine, as we know, is a unique organ inhabited by a tremendous number of microorganisms. Intestinal epithelial cells greatly contribute to the maintenance of the symbiotic relationship between gut microbiota and the host by constructing mucosal barriers, secreting various immunological mediators, and delivering bacterial antigens. Mucosal barriers, including physical barriers and chemical barriers, spatially segregate gut microbiota and the host immune system to avoid unnecessary immune responses to gut microbes, leading to intestinal inflammation. In addition, various immunological mediators, including cytokines and chemokines, secreted from intestinal epithelial cells, which are stimulated by the gut microbiota, modulate host immune responses, and as we know, maintain a well-balanced relationship between gut microbes and the host immune system. Therefore, impairment of the innate immune functions of intestinal epithelial cells is associated with intestinal inflammation. And as you can appreciate, the GI tract is our largest immune organ and centre of most of our immune activity within the body. It's the largest surface of interaction between us and the outside world. And it's the route by which most disease occurs, mutually dependent on the endocrine system. It's also a source of potential local inflammation, which can contribute to systemic inflammation, and so provides the most effective and safest route for immunomodulation. As practitioners, we see a lot of digestive health symptoms at BioNutri. Most of the cases we are asked to advise on revolve around this. The myriad of gut symptoms that present can be due to a number of conditions. Short of having a crystal ball, we cannot know what that might be or the unique complexities that are occurring within that individual. But all these conditions have commonality, regardless of what label we are dealing with. So using a broad, nourishing, naturopathic approach for the gut with cumulative effects, particularly in regard to barrier function and the microbiome, is crucial, rather than a singular approach, particularly with high dose and/or isolated nutrients. So here are some examples of what we commonly see in practice, and there is commonality in these gut conditions. As practitioners, we do have problems with increasing the nourishment of our clients because the diversity of food is not there, and this is what they need. If they have food sensitivities and food intolerances, then that can be difficult because too many foods are missing, and this does affect the gut. There are also overlaps, multiple disorder examples with common functionality. As an example, over 80% of irritable bowel patients have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. This can be associated with fibromyalgia, acute pancreatitis, gastroparesis, reflux and acne rosacea. You see gastroesophageal reflux disease in IBS patients. Sometimes you see candida and parasites which run together, and so on. So how do we deal with this commonality and make the right difference with positive influences on multiple levels? Biosynthesis is the process through which basic nutrients and substrates are enzymatically activated into becoming much more than simply the sum of their parts. It's this process that forms BioNutri's core focus. When using a supplement, bioavailability and biological activity of nutrient combinations is dependent upon a number of factors. Simply bombarding a stressed or weakened system can be either overstimulating or just ineffective. What we need to be looking at is not just the known benefits of probiotics and prebiotics, and we've hardly scratched the surface of knowing about our internal world, but more importantly, what we can do as practitioners to encourage our own gut defences to work through further mechanisms. SIBO, as an example, often represents a breakdown in protective mechanisms. With a lot of individuals so compromised, sometimes we can find that protocols will work temporarily, and this includes probiotics, but then we can get a lessening of effect or recurrence and never really know whether we're getting to the root of the problem. One of our basic functions, which is very much compromised, is a lack of fermentable foods and poor microbial health. Couple this with poor barrier function, the ripple effects can be substantial. Short-chain fatty acids, or SAFAs, produced by intestinal microflora represent a clear example of the importance of the intestinal ecosystem. SAFAs are organic acids produced by intestinal microbial fermentation. They include acetate, propionate, butyrate and valerate, and are essentially produced in the colon. Depending on the substrates present in the gut lumen, gut bacteria can generate specific metabolites. As well as these short-chain fatty acids, also specific bile acid derivatives and vitamins are continuously produced. The relative proportion of SAFAs and eventually their relative abundance and ratio results in a specific host response. And as a result of increasing concentrations of acidic fermentation products, the luminal pH in the proximal colon is lower. This pH seems to boost the formation of butyrate. Butyrate is utilised by mitochondria as an energy source through fatty acid metabolism and controls bowel inflammation and bowel movement. The multiple benefits of butyrate cannot be overestimated. Regulating colonic mucosa homeostasis, tight junction health, healthy colonic cells, improvement of inflammation, oxidative status, epithelial defense barrier, to name but a few. Propionate, another short-chain fatty acid, is a major microbial fermentation metabolite in the human gut with health effects that extend beyond the gut epithelium. Propionate is thought to lower lipogenesis and serum cholesterol levels, as well as carcinogenesis in other tissues. It also improves tissue insulin sensitivity. Another food, arabinogalactan, is another example, and it is resistant to digestion by enzymes in the upper gastrointestinal tract, where it reaches the colon and is slowly fermented by the gastrointestinal microflora. And this promotes the growth of indigenous intestinal microflora, specifically increasing anaerobes such as bifidobacteria, lactobacillus, and potentially decreasing Clostridia. Arabinogalactan, and a good source such as larch, generates at high concentrations production not only of the short-chain fatty acids, but also mono and disaccharides, which are generated from complex carbohydrates during digestion, exert an immune-stimulating role. Arabinogalactan interacts with the immune system, either indirectly through the production of SAFAs that affect inflammatory responses, or intact directly through the gut-associated lymphoid tissue expressed on a range of immune cells. It also decreases the generation and absorption of ammonia. Not only is fermentation of foods by the microflora critical for producing SAFAs for energy and fuel for cells, but there are some regulatory byproducts produced through this process which play vital roles. An example of this is urolithin A, not known in any food source, but produced by the action of microbes on food. An example being pomegranate juice, whose breakdown products, L-glutanins, naturally produce it. Urolithin A can restore mitophagy in cells and prevent the accumulation of dysfunctional mitochondria. L-glutanins and urolithins released in the colon from pomegranate juice inhibit cell proliferation. Pomegranate L-glutanins are not absorbed intact into the bloodstream, but are hydrolyzed to ellagic acid in the intestine, and punicalagin, gallagic acid, and punicalin. These breakdown products of tannins produced in the colon by gut flora are absorbed over a period of time. Punicalagin is the largest known molecular weight polyphenol and is unique to pomegranate. It accounts for a lot of pomegranate's antioxidant activity, as well as being anti-inflammatory for the digestive tract. Another example is pear, whose phenolic acids are conjugated by the colonic microflora to produce other compounds which have multiple health benefits related to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. Lactobacillus acidophilus fermented with pear produces anti-hyperglycemic and anti-hypertensive effects. The procyanidins in pear bind to the mucosa, creating a protective layer against ethanol, reducing leukocyte migration and then deploying a local antioxidant protection against free radicals. Talking about apple and pear pectin, apples and pears are a rich source of pectin, a soluble fibre found in the cell wall of plants which has many different biological activities. Pectin is modified by colonic bacteria into short-chain fatty acids that provide ideal pH conditions, as we've said before, for ensuring a beneficial balance of microorganisms. Pectic polysaccharides bind to fatty substances in the tract, including cholesterol and triglycerides. Apple pectin decreases the activity of beta-glucuronidase, an enzyme from fecal bacteria. They also help to regulate blood glucose, delay gastric emptying, and improve satiety. They can help firm stools and reduce inflammation associated with diarrhea, as well as help with constipation. Pectin can preserve gut barrier function, help alleviate metabolic endotoxemia, heavy metal burden, reduce the side effects of radiation, and is anti-inflammatory. There is an important nutrient, lectin-3, which is a protein which is found throughout the body, performing important cellular functions and plays a key role in remodeling connective tissue. Modified pectin binds to lectin-3, a carbohydrate-binding protein, and prevents overexpression, which is associated with angiogenesis and aberrant cell growth. So these are just some examples of multiple benefits of certain nutrients when combined with beneficial microflora, which will have ongoing cumulative effects in restoring the health of the GI tract and, more importantly, enable our own mechanisms to function more efficiently with distal effects. One example of a prime fermenting organism is Lactobacillus gasseri. We are familiar with the beneficial effects of resident lactic acid bacteria such as Acidophilus and Bifido, which can be enhanced, as an example, with the use of pomegranate juice. But transient bacteria such as Lactobacillus kefir can also play a key role within our own commensal bacteria populations. Lactobacillus kefir and bulgaricus are transitory bacteria commonly found in milk and milk products with a long safe history of use. Kefir, from Arabic or kef, means good feeling, and they can provide a good environment for our own bacteria to flourish, as well as reducing milk proteins and fats, helping to break down cellulose and starches, generally supporting the digestive process and helping to form a good stool, and also helping with food intolerances. Moving on to the gut barrier, I'm going to talk about that now, and this is a selective permeable and only a single layer of cells that work together with our gut microbes to form a barrier between the external environment and our bloodstream. The gut barrier nourishes and protects us, and it's often compromised due to depleted microbiomes and less than optimal gut health. And this can mean that molecules can leak into our inner system and cause inflammation and aberrant immune responses. We can try and influence barrier function by introducing certain nutrients. But recently it's been shown that dying epithelial cells at cell surfaces inhibit certain pathways, and this has not been known before. This issue is especially significant at barrier surfaces such as the GI tract, where large numbers of epithelial cells detach and die via apoptosis. This is the driver behind phytoepicel, which has many synergistic mechanisms at play. Looking at the illustration, you can see that commensal bacteria can induce dendritic cells to release interferon beta, which promotes Treg cell proliferation. However, apoptotic epithelial cells can inhibit this pathway. In this way, damaged, dying epithelial cells can modulate Treg cells, critically important for controlling immune response and maintaining self-tolerance. This is one of the mechanisms promoting allergy and inflammatory diseases. The power of plant-based foods and their many derivatives cannot be overestimated. The synergy between various plant compounds under the influence of enzymes from plants such as papaya and pineapple and beneficial microflora can also not be overestimated rather than isolated approaches. Flavonoids are polyphenols that play an important role in defending plant cells against microorganisms, insects and UV radiation. Our own defences can also benefit greatly. However, in a world of poor plant intake and lack of diversity, this can not only lead to a lack of fermentable food, but also the nutrients and enzymes needed to nourish us, enabling a better metabolism and driving a recovery in our own health. Two very important examples are luteolin and apigenin. Luteolin is a citrus flavonoid found in many plants, including chamomile, dandelion and milk thistle, and has multiple biological effects in maintaining normal cell health. Luteolin is blood-brain barrier permeable for central nervous system diseases and is neuroprotective. Also protects or enhances endogenous antioxidants such as glutathione, superoxide dismutase and catalase. Luteolin suppresses LPS or bacteria-induced inflammation and also suppresses cytokines and their signal transduction pathways such as TNF-alpha as an example, IL-6 and IL-17. Apigenin has significant anti-inflammatory, antioxidant and anti-carcinogenic properties. Apigenin complements the potential and effectiveness of other flavonoids like luteolin. It also has anti-diabetic effects in the body by potentiating the GLUT4 response to insulin. It's anti-inflammatory in the GI tract through antioxidant activity and elimination of inflammatory cells. Most important, apigenin unites with approximately 160 proteins in the human body and helps proteins correct the abnormalities in RNA.
The eyes, we are told, are the windows to the soul. I'm not too sure about this one myself. I see the soul as something a little more enigmatic than a thing which can be observed through the permutations of tissue. But the eye is, in all of us, young and old, able or infirm, a thing of dazzling beauty and complexity. And it's perhaps from this connotation that the soul connection actually originates. I do, however, certainly agree with Bernard Jensen's view that the irides are also the lights of the tissue. Through iridology, there's a common thread of analysis which ties together the traditional medicine practitioners of all the different corners of the earth. As such, iridology is a true science, not a fixed concept as many would believe science to be, but a process of observation taking place throughout the ages through an open desire to understand the tissue, its pathways and its connections. Like this, iridology is constantly evolving, fluid, a bit like the soul. Now, I'm not an iridologist. More of my time is spent looking into the fibres of plants than those of the human physiology. But I do believe that a decent grasp of iridology along with a torch and a good lens are powerful tools in the hands of the healthcare practitioner. Why? Because the irides show us a complete picture of the body's tissue within a small sphere. And within that sphere, we must acknowledge the wider picture of a client's health. I'm not saying that iridology is a diagnostic tool. It's not. And diagnosis is something that falls better within the remit of a medic than a nutritionist. But through this form of analysis, a good practitioner can follow the subtle inhibitions, subtle disorders, and the retardations that lead to disease. One of the things that fascinates me about iridology maps of both East and West is the amount of space that's taken up by the gut, but more specifically the colon. To paint you a picture, if you look at the right eye and follow the iris just outside the ring of the pupil from 7 o'clock all the way around to 1 o'clock, we've got the cecum, the ascending colon, and the transverse colon. Move over to the left eye and follow around from 11 o'clock all the way around to 6 o'clock, and we have the transverse colon again, the descending colon, and the sigmoid colon. Now, this area extends out from the pupil about a quarter to a fifth of the way, depending on individual size. The colon area is then contained within a milky white translucent ring called the autonomic nervous ring, and that represents the nerve tissue. This is not just remarkable because of its mass over other organs and glands, but it shows us how fundamental the role of the colon in the maintenance of, and the repair of the wider tissue of the body. Following on from the colon region stems the kidneys, the reproductive organs, the liver, the lungs, the brain, the spleen, and the heart. As I learned in Bernard Jensen's excellent book, Visions of Health, the positioning of the colon in the iridology chart is no coincidence. The area it takes up actually represents the proportional mass of the colon quite well. It also is a perfect illustration of how the tissue develops in the womb. All tissue in a growing fetus emanates from tissue cells identical to those that we find in the colon. However you look at it, this analysis shows us that when it comes to the tissue, the colon is pretty important. Furthermore, when we're looking to treat a disorder or inflammation, perhaps looking a little deeper than the point of distress is necessary in our endeavour to pursue health. If there's one thing I've learned in over 20 years working with nutritionists and naturopaths, it's that the common thread between all of their clients is poor gut health. If we accept that the gut is involved no matter where a chronic disease manifests, then we have a key contender for the battleground in fighting chronic disease and regaining order. But order must come in the shape of a multifaceted approach. The gut plays host to the microbiome, but it also sustains a massive body of tissue, both of which are receptive to each other. In formulating two new products, BioNutri have looked to identify with these two major systems in the gut, the epithelium and the microbiome, and set out to nourish and support them in as best a way as possible. PhytoEpicell contains high phytonutrient yielding plant foods like chamomile, dandelion, green tea and milk thistle, and combine them with lactic acid bacteria, enzymes, D-limonene and vitamin B3 to nourish and to support the integrity of our epithelial cells. PhytoEpicell recognises the fundamental role that phytonutrients play in supporting cell health. However, it also recognises that even the best nutrition needs first to be digested. So it combines plant foods alongside active compounds like Lactobacillus plantarum, bromelain and papain to support bioavailability. On the other hand, Immunodophilus is a high-strength lactic acid bacteria, which, with complex plant fibres like apple pectin, larch arabinogalactin, it has fruit extracts and pulps of pear and pomegranate, and vitamin C, vitamin B5, vitamin B6, which all help to maintain the normal function of the immune system. More than just a simple pro or prebiotic, Immunodophilus is geared towards a system of nourishing and supporting the microbiome. Whilst the probiotic system often benefits by producing organisms whose novel value stimulates our immune system, Immunodophilus looks at supporting the microbiome through priming and promoting the fermentation of organisms that suit our nutrition, our health. After all, if the microbiome is nourished and healthy, then we have access to better nutrition. When our immune system isn't being constantly overstimulated and we have more energy. Best of all, Immunodophilus offers this in a 5-day course. Chamomile is a herb that has fascinated me throughout my working life. Here is a plant blessed with all the gifts. Aromatic compounds that are carminative, soporific, anodyne, anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial. It really is the naturopathic chocolate box of activity. But whilst I am prone to pointing out the many virtues of plants, these constituents should always be taken within the context of the life of the plant, not the person. You see, all plants contain antimicrobial, antioxidant properties. You wouldn't be a plant out in the wilderness for very long if you didn't. It is not so much important how a plant extract behaves under a microscope, but how all that activity will play itself out once we've consumed it. My first experience working with chamomile came just over 20 years ago when, working in a health food shop in Birmingham, I regularly spoke to people who were suffering with insomnia. They were often shift workers, always dealing with quite high levels of stress. And after receiving advice from a very experienced practitioner, I started to recommend that insomniacs drink chamomile tea on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. It turned out to be quite a successful recommendation, and peculiar given that the instinct first thing in the morning is to reach out for the coffee pot for stimulation. What I realised then was that chamomile was helping to modulate the surge of stress that is generated to haul someone out of bed in the morning, and that by modulating this from the outset, the client was much better able to produce a balance of stress levels throughout the day and finally get off to sleep in the evening. Now, Phytoepicel is not something that has been formulated for insomniacs. It sets out to nourish the epithelium, but stress is central to the health of our cells. It's an important point that whilst other botanical formulations may look to exploit stimulation as a way to bring about a sense of well-being, BioNutri operates on a whole different level. Our products prime, they promote, they support, and above all, they nourish the systems of the body. BioNutri recognises that nutrition is the king of the healing sciences, and with good, well-constituted nutrition, the practitioner can support the recovery of some of the most entrenched disorders, as was observed by Hippocrates 2,500 years ago, and countless therapists since. The flavones found in Phytoepicel's botanical blend, apigenin and luteolin, are key to the nutrition of the epithelial cell. Imagine for a moment our Paleolithic ancestor grazing his or her way through the world. They're not picking a coronation chicken sandwich up at the Paleolithic pit stop. They are not, in fact, labouring over a spit roast. No. More typical of the diet of our ancestors is food that is plucked from a tree. As they move through the countryside, we have inherited this innate need for plant foods or phytonutrients to be moving through our gastrointestinal tract throughout the day. For one thing, the modern diet rarely offers up the variety of food groups that our evolving ancestors would have come into contact with. For another thing, a person seeking out the help of a nutritionist or a naturopath invariably has poor gut health. Ply them with all the phytonutrients you want. It won't necessarily get them very far, as the gut is so poorly prepared to deal with the density of nutrition presented to them. So, PhytoEpicell aims to overcome this problem by combining high phytonutrient yielding plant foods like chamomile with dandelion root and dandelion leaf, green tea, alongside materials that enhance and assist their digestion like milk thistle, bromelain, papain, limonene and Lactobacillus plantarum. All digestive factors that can support the availability of these fundamental phytonutrients. Over the last 2 years in the development of PhytoEpicell, the question has often been posed, well, who will need to take this product? Well, let's put it another way. Who needs support in nourishing the massive body of tissue taken up by the colon, king of the tissue? From which body of tissue does a chronic disease emanate, and how can we set about nourishing it? I'll let you fill in the gaps, but I feel that PhytoEpicell will become at least part of the answer. However you look at it, the microbiome is very complex and massively misunderstood. Even the healthiest among us will be playing host to organisms that get some of the worst press. So it's probably not such a great thing for us to become fixated upon the presence of individual organisms. Rather, which colonies form the sphere of influence within the gut. Those in a state of poor health will find that sphere of influence tipped in favour of organisms that do not support our nutritive demands. And as a result, our cells lack the energy they require to suitably regenerate and reproduce. The order of our tissue is undermined, and crucially, we suffer the symptoms of chronic disease, which are all too familiar to many. I was interested to read recently that people suffering with Crohn's disease have a much higher incidence of Candida auris. Here is an example of the sphere of influence tipped in favour of an opportunistic organism, and Crohn's is a perfect example of how the tissue responds to this unwelcome guest. It will physically alter its structure to envelop the pathogen, starving it out. This reflex is not exclusive to humans or even the animal kingdom. A tree responds in much the same way, just as we can see from an oak, ash or birch gall. The tissue in the bark of the tree, or even the leaf, will alter itself to envelop its pest, be it fungus or insect larvae, and lock it out of the wider tissue. Different animal, same response. So the question is, when we have a client whose immune system is undermined to this extent, how can we support them? Through the tissue or through the positive influence over the microbiome? Well, with PhytoEpicell and Immunodophilus, we have the opportunity to do both. On the face of it, Immunodophilus is a strong, short-term probiotic with fruit extracts in a powdered form. But go a little deeper and you'll see that it's so much more than that. Here is a combination of organisms that have shown their value to human health. The overwhelming organism, Lactobacillus kefir, is often associated with fermented foods like suguki, kimchi, sauerkraut, feta, and kefir, and much revered for its immunosupportive benefits. I often associate the value of this organism as one of drawing away unwanted or redundant materials from the gut. Rather than stimulating the immune system directly, I feel that Lactobacillus kefir is something that can remove the burden of toxicity. This is supported by a host of other organisms, and the widely revered Lab 4 proprietary blend, which collectively form a current of low-level immune stimulation, often associated with probiotics. But what follows makes Immunodophilus a little more exciting than just another probiotic. Good probiotics stimulate us. They make us feel better because their active presence allows us to function at a slightly higher level. Some probiotics exploit far-fetched organisms from soil cultures or other origins whose relative foreignness to the gut stimulate us even further. This is not without its benefits. But stimulation is not health. And sustainable health should always be the pursuit of the healthcare practitioner. Remove the stimulating factor and the undercurrent of poor health can resume. In this respect, Immunodophilus differs because the formulation is geared not only towards stimulation, but toward the positive fermentation of our own colonies of lactic acid bacteria. Because in the end, it is our own strains of our own organisms that maintain us in a state of health. Now, of course, these organisms need a substrate to colonize from, but even in this, we've once again looked at the soluble fibres available to us and considered which would act as not only the optimal food for the lactic acid bacteria, but form a nutritive base to our innate immune system. Often, a probiotic blend will rely upon chicory fibre, FOS or fructooligosaccharides. As many of us will know, this can come with its own digestive drawbacks. Immunodophilus uses pear pulp, apple pectin, pomegranate juice and larch arabinogalactin as its combined substrate. Sue McGarrigle will have taken you through the specifics of these, so it remains for me to reiterate that the ingredients were selected to work with the microflora, to stimulate the regeneration of healthy cells, and also to protect those cells from the opportunistic organism. In its last stage of development, I had the opportunity to take a 5-day course of Immunodophilus. The initial feeling is that of a good probiotic, a convivial sensation in the gut which underlies a sense of positivity. But I think the most remarkable thing about my experience with this formulation is that the strongest sense of well-being arose a week after I had finished taking it. My sense of good health grew throughout the time and then carried on for a full 4 weeks after I'd finished taking it. I should also say that during this time I wasn't taking any other probiotics or other supplements. We have coined the term kickstart the microbiome when discussing Immunodophilus, but you could also imagine it this way. A 5-day course is perhaps equal to a drop in the ocean in terms of the overall mass of the microbiome. But this drop is a drop of weather that creates a surge of activity, a surge that resonates well-being into our cells. When asked whether a longer dose is a necessary thing for particularly diminished clients, my response has been to ask practitioners not to underestimate the value of this five-day program. My best recommendation is to take the 5-day course on a full stomach, and after that move on to Ecodophilus or a preferred probiotic to help maintain the surge brought on by the Immunodophilus. Thank you for listening.